All right, we've been talking today about the life and legacy of Aaron Swartz, and we're joined now by David Segal, who was his longtime friend, collaborator, and co-founder of the organization Demand Progress. And David, we want to start out by playing a little clip of Aaron describing the way that he got into the issue that really kind of birthed your organization in a lot of ways. So let's roll that first shot here.
So for me, it all started with a phone call. It was September. Not last year, but the year before that, September 2010. And I got a phone call from my friend Peter. Aaron, he said, there's an amazing bill that you have to take a look at. Well, what is it? I said. It's called COICA, the Combating Online Infringement and Counterfeiting Act. Oh, Peter, I said, I don't care about copyright law. Maybe you're right, maybe Hollywood is right, but either way, what's the big deal? I'm not going to waste my life fighting over a little issue like copyright. Healthcare, financial reform, those are the issues that I work on, not something obscure like copyright law. I could hear Peter grumbling in the background. Look, I don't have time to argue with you, he said, but it doesn't matter for right now because this isn't a bill about copyright. It's not? No, he said, it's a bill about the freedom to connect. Now I was listening.
And so, David, how did you end up getting roped into what became this titanic fight on Capitol Hill over the future of the internet?
So, Aaron and I met a year or so prior to that phone call during a campaign that ended up losing for Congress in Rhode Island. I was a member of the state legislature at the time, and he was involved in an organization that endorsed me, became sort of embedded in my campaign. We became very close friends. And at the end of the campaign, we were both trying to figure out what to do. And that phone call between Peter, who unfortunately passed away towards the end of last year, and Aaron is effectively what led to the instantiation of Demand Progress. We began mobilizing people at scale, and initially at a scale of tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands, and then with more and more colleagues and other organizations as part of a coalition that eventually led to on the order of literally tens of millions of people speaking out in opposition to this legislation that would have undercut the fundamental architecture of the internet in important ways.
All right, and so yeah, on that point, let's roll this second one to get a little more context.
Partly because I think big stories like this one are just more interesting at human scale. The director J.D. Walsh says good stories should be like the poster for Transformers. There's a huge evil robot on the left side of the poster and a huge big army on the right side of the poster. And then in the middle, at the bottom, there's just a small family trapped in the middle. Big stories need human stakes. But mostly it's a personal story because I didn't have time to research any other part of it. But that's kind of the point. We won this fight because everyone made themselves the hero of their own story. Everyone took it as their job to save this crucial freedom. They threw themselves into it. They did whatever they could think of to do. They didn't stop to ask anyone for permission.
Yeah, and so how did you craft the heroes and villains of that story?
Well, it was one of the first moments where we really saw the internet used as a tool at scale, or the internet, the anthropomorphization of the internet, sort of rise up and do something huge. This was a bill that seemed destined to pass. You had the chair people of the relevant committees in the House and Senate. You had Republicans and Democrats all aligned around it. And effectively what it was going to do was make it illegal under certain circumstances, not just to host content that was ostensibly in violation of copyright and other IP laws, but make it illegal even to link to websites that house such content. And so you can see how this would have undermined search engines, the social web, the ability for people to even potentially post comments on blogs or on websites, and was going to lock down the internet in a way that it hadn't previously been. And it's inspired literally millions, tens of millions of people to engage and effectively use the tools of the internet, of the open internet, to save the open internet. And so the villains in the story were the Chamber of Commerce, a variety of other different interest groups that cared more about private profit, about rent seeking, than they did about the ability of rank and file people to connect with one another in a horizontal way.
What has it been like over the last 10 years to watch that particular battle shift into different forms? Again, since we're marking 10 years today, over the last 10 years, obviously there have been incredible changes, a culture shift in Silicon Valley and folks who work on these issues, and on Capitol Hill. So what has transpired, and what's it been like to watch that?
The internet has in other ways become increasingly locked down. Obviously, we've got 4 or 5 whatever hegemons who now control the bulk of information flows. Sounds like something you guys might have been talking about earlier in the show. And we came at this work not as like techno-utopians. Aaron had an info-utopian streak earlier in his life, and had sort of soured on that even to some degree. We can talk about that more in a bit, perhaps. But our institutional work has moved into realms like antitrust and trying to ensure that these largest platforms are broken up and otherwise regulated in ways mean that they have less discretion over the content flows, which right now they warp towards private profit, towards political ends, in ways that are concerning to people across the political spectrum.
And was the utopianism of that time kind of always doomed? And if so, kind of what can we take from it and bring forward to try to make the current system less dystopian?
I think there was a naive utopianism at the outset. I mean, I was not around in the 70s doing acid imagining what new tools might allow for the world to become. I can sort of see how some people got to that utopian vision, but you've got these tracks like John Perry Barlow's famous writing about asserting that cyberspace was a realm that the government must stay away from, which was not welcome fundamentally, and that notion led to a more sort of corporate utopianism whose ability to actually be utopian has been belied over the course of recent years. There's a tension that's necessary between private actors and the government in order to maintain an ecosystem that's not dominated by one or the other. And I think that we're seeing that manifest now in these fights around antitrust, efforts around net neutrality years before, and which might emerge again soon once there's a full Biden FCC, where more and more people in Silicon Valley, more and more people care about the internet, generally speaking, understand that government has an important role to play in maintaining an ecosystem that allows for people to connect horizontally, that allows for new firms to develop and exploit the potential commercial benefits of the internet, that allows for speech to flourish.
And the government has really never understood Silicon Valley. It's really never understood the basic, the function of the internet. You have boomer politicians who are trying to understand what email and Facebook is in congressional hearings. And I have to imagine that still hampers their ability to fight back against nefarious lobbying from these massive tech hegemons, as you mentioned. How is the government's ability to understand what it's governing, what it's legislating, what it's overseeing, improving, if at all?
It's a good question. I mean, I think that we have seen certain of these concerns really best. Like, I think that net neutrality is now essentially a universal position taken among Democrats, and it wasn't that way at all for a long time. It was over the course years of organizing, in some ways that emulated what we did around SOPA PIPA, again, mobilizing on the order of 10 million people or so to weigh in and make it clear that this was an important issue. And when I'm talking about net neutrality, I mean the ability of the internet service providers to warp information flows towards private benefit in a variety of ways. And we had really strong rules put in place towards the end of the Obama administration. Then Trump's administration then did them. And we expect that once we have a full FTC, we'll see another net neutrality rulemaking. And I think there's an understanding increasingly. You ask every single politician exactly what net neutrality is, you'll probably get a variety of different answers. But there's an understanding now that matters. I think that what happens at the platform layer is a little bit more complicated. And I think we see people on a learning curve. We saw a number of different bills last session make it through committee, House and Senate, that are pretty complicated and do important things to reduce the ability of the biggest companies to buy up their competitors, or reduce the ability of some of the larger companies to augment information flows within their platforms to elevate their own services over competitors' services, these kinds of things. So by no means is like a deep understanding of like the technical aspects of these questions ubiquitous now, but we're having a real debate, and there are more and more people on the Hill who do get it.
And you flagged for us a couple of quotes from Aaron that actually are kind of related to this question about utopianism and naivete. And it seemed like he was starting to see that there needed to be kind of a more active role in defending and not just defending, but also producing an open internet. And that if you don't do that, that kind of nobody else is going to do it. And particularly, I don't know if you have it near you, the one about transparency, where he talks about it being something useful, but not sufficient in itself.
Yeah, and so I'd say that Aaron came up during this era. Part of this relates back to the techno-utopianism. There's this broader sort of info-utopian concept, essentially that information not only should be free, but essentially like wants to be free, that it has agency, almost wants to be free. You can get that information out there, and then the right outcome is somehow going to manifest. It's going to be emergent. And so this quote is, transparency can be a powerful thing, but not in isolation. So let's stop passing the buck by saying our job is just to get the data out there, and it's other people's job to figure out how to use it. Let's decide that our job is to fight for good in the world. I'd love to see all these amazing resources go to work on that. And so this is, I think, a moment where he's transitioning from somebody who cares foremost about questions of open access to information in a variety of different ways. He did extraordinary work around that, but he's transitioning to being more an organizer, being more of a mass mobilizer. And he goes on to, for instance, co-found the Progressive Change Campaign Committee and then demand progress. He's getting involved in elections and election reform. He's going to work on the Hill for Alan Grayson. And so now we have this much more expansive legacy that ranges from his early work on things like RSS or Creative Commons to his efforts to try to make PACER, the federal court document system, free, which is an ongoing fight, almost actually vested in the fall, but failed by a bit, to his work on things like Secure Drop to make it easier for whistleblowers to offer information to NGOs or to journalistic outlets, to the founding of Demand Progress and the Progressive Change Campaign Committee, which have taken on work of economic justice and anti-corporatism as all as parts of his vast legacy.
And the work that he wasn't able to do over the last 10 years is a profound and painful loss for all of us, including people who had never heard of him before and may never even hear of him, because he touched so many lives of people that didn't even know how that was happening. But David, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be doing more on this theme in the coming weeks, and appreciate your help in coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Sagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.